Zadie Bees proudly presents the Faith, Fashion, and the Hustle podcast, hosted by the founder of Zadie Bees, Sonia Bryant.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Faith, Fashion, Hustle podcast today. And I am thrilled to have a lady on this podcast with us today that's been doing podcasting for quite some time. And I just recently heard about her and have been introduced to her podcast, loving listening to her podcast. So I am so thrilled to have her today. Her name is Jamie Herndon. And actually we have a mutual friend, Miranda, who works for me, and her and Jamie are friends, and that's how I heard about Jamie. So I'm super excited. She is the pro, and I'm going to learn all kinds of stuff today. So I'm looking forward to this. Welcome, Jamie, to the podcast. How are you today?
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. I am absolutely no pro. Maybe I can learn
I
some.
think so.
We have just recorded our 197th podcast.
That's incredible. That is amazing.
Yeah, so we released released 193 on the episode last Friday. So yeah, but we have recorded up to those. So we do release a podcast every single Friday.
Okay.
And with Unashamedly You, and we're coming up on, which is so wild to say, 4 years.
4 years.
This
Wow.
year. Yeah.
That's awesome. So if you haven't started listening to Jamie's podcast, she's Unashamedly You, and that's a really cool name. So I want her to expound on that today and explain to us. So you've been doing this for 4 years, but where did the name and the title come? How did that come into your life? Oh, I'd love to hear.
So it's kind of funny. When we started talking about Unashamedly You and the name, Valerie Hicks, those of you that may know her, she owns the Valley Collective.
Yes.
Well, at the time, she was actually doing branding and stationery. And I had been feeling a pull to do a community to encourage, empower women, to enlighten them that, hey, you can be whatever God has called you to be. And so I was just telling her kind of about this community that I was wanting. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't even know that it would fully be just mainly a podcast. I'm thinking about all different things to empower and to encourage women to go be whatever God's called them to be. And so I was just telling her about it. And I'm like, whether they are going to be a stay-at-home mom, whether they're showing up online, which can be really scary, whether they are going to be an entrepreneur, just in ministry, in all things, just to find a space to be encouraged that they can do it. Yes. And she said, what about like unashamedly you? Like just, unashamedly being yourself. And I'm like, that's exactly what she's like. That's what it sounds like whenever you're describing it. That's what it sounds like. So really, I have to credit the name to her.
That's
just talking
cool.
about it. We looked it up. She's like, we'll probably have to tweak some things and change some things up because it's going to be, more than likely taken. Well, it wasn't. Unashamedlyu.com was available. It was available on social media sites.
It was meant to be.
It just wasn't taken. There was a scripture that helped out with it. It was just like everything it was really wild. And it was honestly, as soon as we heard it and then we realized all those things, I'm like, this is the name. This is exactly what it's supposed to be. So Unashamedly You was born.
Yeah, that's cool. And so you're encouraging ladies to embrace who God created in them. And I love that. I think that's super cool. Sometimes social media has good and bad, and sometimes we have to dig through that. But Unashamedly You sometimes reflects people look at things online and look at people and compare themselves. But you're encouraging women to see what God created in them, and I love that. It's called stepping into obedience. So you kind of started this and had a calling. I feel like it's a calling to do something to empower women of apostolic faith, Christian women, to follow their lead to what the Lord was calling them to do. I'd love to hear about kind of how you've empowered these women, and it's pretty amazing. You've interviewed a host of ladies, 190 something podcasts. That's incredible. And I haven't listened to them all. I've listened to some, but I haven't listened to them all. But that's pretty incredible. What would you say was one thing that you've noticed during these podcasts that's really made an impression on you about women and in their calling. Can you think of one thing?
I would say probably one of the biggest realizations is whenever you listen to other people's testimonies, are every person at some point in some way, we're all the same.
Yeah.
When God calls you, we're always scared. Women, we compare ourselves among ourselves, which is a sin, and it's something that I
Yes.
try to hit heavy on. It's the thief of joy completely and fully. Um, and it that really is truly what it is everybody when God calls you to something, and it's truly something that God has placed on your heart. It's birthed through prayer, through a message, through
Mm.
starting to feel that conviction, starting to feel that God's placing on your heart. It gets heavy, it becomes burdensome.
Yes.
And then you start realizing and thinking, I can't do this. I can't do this on my own. I always tell people that's kind of how you learn if God's
Yeah.
calling you to it or if it's something that you're doing on your own, is because whenever you want to go after it, whenever it's something you want to do, whenever it's something that you feel like you can do on your own, you're not sick about it, you're not having to get underneath the pew constantly and pray
Right.
about it, you're not having to tell God about all the reasons why that you're not the fit for what he's actually asking of you.
Mhm.
Then you know that it's something from the Lord. And whenever he calls you to something, and through this podcast, the Unashamedly You podcast, and hearing testimonies and hearing other women, no matter what God has placed on their heart, no matter what they're doing, no matter what they're going after,
Mm.
every single person, eventually they all say, I didn't feel qualified. I didn't feel like that
That's
I could do
something.
it. I was scared. I was nervous.
Yes.
And I was broke. I didn't have the money to start it, or we didn't have the money to do it, or I didn't have a clue how to even start. I didn't have a clue how to begin. But God
Yeah.
started opening doors, and I started walking
It's
through them, and He made a
amazing.
way here, and He made a way there, and that's just been proof. After every single person's story and testimony, everybody all says the exact same thing: is God made a way when there was no way, and if He's going to do it for me, He's going to do it for you.
That's amazing. I had a young lady stand in my office less than an hour ago. She's leaving today to go to Urshan College to study psychology. She wants to be and I told her, I said, Faith, without struggle, we never learn. Life is many times, a lot of times, life is a struggle, and we don't learn unless we struggle. I mean, if life comes easy and the enemy's not after us, we're not obviously not doing what we're called to do. So life, there's so many things that are, um, life is, it really is. But that's really cool because you're right. If you really are following the lead of the Lord, it's not easy. It's not always the easiest path, is it? It's not the most easy path. One interview that you can say that stayed with you for a long time, something that really made a deep impression on you. I'd love for you to share that with this audience.
So many. Honestly, I feel so blessed to even be able to interview such incredible women. I always say,
Mm-hmm.
Unashamedly You podcast. I am the smallest part of the Unashamedly You podcast. I get to host and I get to be there. I get to speak with these incredible women of God, but it's them. It's their stories. It's what they're
Yes.
sharing. So each and every single one of them are amazing. I think what I would have to say overall, the stories that make the most impact to me personally, and some of the ones that
Mm-hmm.
have been listened to so many times, are the ones that they were in a season where it seemed like they shouldn't have made it out.
Mm-hmm.
They were in a season where, Abigail, Sister Abigail Peterson, her story comes to mind recently. It was one where, and I told her in the interview, I said, I don't even know how you're surviving this, but God. You have
Right.
survived, the only way that you have survived through life has been God.
Yes.
And there's so many interviews that are like that. There's Sister Cindy Morrison, her story of just brings so much faith, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
testimony after testimony of but God.
Yeah.
And so those are the ones that I'm always like, there's so many that I glean from, that I learned from, and that I absolutely love. But there's so many stories out there that you have to stop and say, you know what? We really are all just striving and surviving through
Yes.
life to
Yes.
be like God and for his help and for his strength. And those are I feel like the podcast, when I hear something, Sister Robin Burgess, and there's so many that can come to mind. And
Yes.
like, I, but God, like
That's
it,
right.
and them getting to hear their stories and them to be able to share those testimonies of, you know, I shouldn't have made it through this, and I'm still not even fully through this. I'm just
Right.
learning to live one day at a time with the help of the Lord, and just proof that you can make it through things you think you can't make it through.
Exactly. Their testimonies burn into your heart, and you're like, okay, if I encounter a situation, I know God's going to come through for me too. What was one of the podcasts that surprised you the most? Do you remember one of those?
Let me think.
That's kind of a loaded question, isn't it?
Uh-huh. Um, so one of the podcasts that may have surprised me the most was um I guess maybe Sister Peterson. Like I didn't really know her full story, I feel like.
Uh-huh.
That
Uh-huh.
was one that I didn't really know the full depth of her story and the things that had happened through it. And that's probably with every single podcast, something is said on there that's been a complete surprise.
Yeah.
It's been something that's been like, whoa. And every time it's like, I didn't know you went through that. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that that was going on in your life. There's been friends that have done podcasts and you sit back and you think, man, I had no clue you were going
No,
through that or that it was
no idea.
that bad or that things had gotten, that serious in this situation.
Yeah,
And you just realize that all of us really are going through something at some point in some
it's
time that
true.
we need help with.
Sometimes we just put our face on and head to church and head out into the world, and no one knows what's going on behind the scenes, but we have God walking with us, and it's really interesting. I love to hear people's stories of how God brings them through situation after situation, and I equally have so many stories that I look back and think, wow, how did I make it through? And I love it. I'm going to go listen to some of those ones you mentioned I haven't listened to yet. With podcasting, what has it taught you personally about consistency and discipline? Those are two things I think that people like you and myself, we work really hard at stuff, and so these are some of the things that pop up. How do you how do you deal with consistency and discipline in your life?
I think one of the biggest things that you have to realize whenever you go to start something is this a hobby or is this really something that I'm wanting to become something? You
Yeah,
know, is it's just a hobby? And whenever you think of something as, oh, it's just a hobby, I'm just doing it for fun. Um, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's kind of
that's
the
right.
attitude that you start it with.
Agreed.
And with this podcast, my husband, he is really the OCD, the brains behind all this stuff. And
I
he's
love it.
like, um, and because of that, we started this podcast. And he said, if you're going to start a podcast and if you're going to do a podcast, you're going to do it right. There's going to be
Awesome.
a podcast that releases every single Friday. Um,
Yes.
we have in this time, we've only done maybe 2 Fridays where there just was not an episode that come out. Um, He's like, you're going to release one every single Friday, and we're going to do it to the best of our abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, it's going to be professional. I don't want it to look like, oh, this is just something for fun. This is just a
Sure.
hobby. And people think that, I mean, I have time's too precious to waste it. I
Absolutely.
also feel that way about my listeners. I have said from the very, very beginning, I don't want a podcast that's just full of air. I don't want a podcast
Mhm.
that is um, kind of just a for fun listen. There's tons of those podcasts. You are literally
Absolutely.
competing with millions of people.
Yes.
If it's
Yes.
just a fun listen, if it's just, something that's lighthearted or something that they can follow and find, those are everywhere out there. I'm like, I want a podcast that is anointed, that is
Absolutely.
something that is going to bring meat, that is something that is going to be when they spend an hour on the Unashamedly You podcast, they leave it feeling like they've got a word from the Lord.
That's awesome.
And that is exactly what we started Unashamedly You podcast with. And that's been my goal, and that's been what has been in mind every single Friday is the questions that I ask are all
Hmm.
geared around the people that I ask are all geared around what is something that if they listen to this, they didn't feel like, oh, that was fun, or I just had a great time listening to that, or, like I might have picked up one or two things, but they leave the podcast feeling like, you know what? God is my help. God
I
is my
concur because I felt the same way when I've listened to him. It's impressive what you've done with your podcasting, and it is. It's very very heartfelt, and you can feel and honestly, it's very anointed, and I appreciate what you've done and what you've brought this to. And like I said, I just recently became acquainted with your podcast, so I've got a lot of listening to do. I've got a lot of catching up to do here. And I was going to ask you the question about behind the scenes, but you've already kind of touched on that, Jamie, about the behind the scenes about your husband and you guys collaborate. He's the brains behind the podcast, and you're the
100%.
presenter. You're the presenter and the face of Unashamedly You. And
I am.
I'm just my son, I mentioned to him, Dallas, I know you've met him. I know you guys were at camp, and he's like, "Oh, I was talking to him on the phone the other day." I said, "Dallas, I'm going to interview Jamie Herndon." He goes, "Oh, Mom, I met them at camp." And it was really cool. So I was like, "Oh, I didn't know." But Dallas knows everybody. He knows everybody. So, okay, let's go back to I honestly, what's kept you consistent? I know we kind of talked about that, but I know there's probably been times there's probably weeks that you had a rough week and you're like, okay, do I really have time to do this? I know you have children and you have a family and you're a busy wife and you're involved in your church. I'm certain of that. But so sometimes I'm sure there's days you're like, oh, I don't really have the What keeps you going, girl?
So one of the things that keeps you going is listeners. I'm like,
Yes.
what am I going to do to just not show up on this week, And I've got several that are very faithful on Friday mornings. I'm getting a text if I don't have a
Oh,
and so I'm like, I've got to have something for them. Um, I will say that honestly, anytime that I've thought it's just not working out, I mean, I'll have
yeah,
someone, and sometimes life works out where I've got several episodes, and we're, done for the month of August already.
sure.
And we got that done because I knew August was going to be busy, school starting, all the things.
Yes.
And then there's some months like December or, Christmas and all the craziness ended. And then there's January,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, who can I ask now? Who can I ask now? And it's like moving week. And you schedule someone and they get sick or they have to cancel for some reason.
Sure.
And you're like, what am I going to do? That was my podcast in 2 days, And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
so it's like phone a friend. I've definitely asked some friends that have been on
I
the
lo-
podcast more than one time. I'm like, hey, I'm a podcast and I know that you are used to this and you can do it, help me out. And they're
yeah.
so willing, which I'm grateful for that. Um, but I will say at the beginning of this podcast, we
Mhm.
decided this was going to be professional. This is going to be something
Yeah.
that we're going to put out a product and we're going to put out a podcast that is something that they can glean from, and it's something that they can
Mm-hmm.
count on.
Yes.
This isn't just a hobby. This isn't just something that we're doing for fun. This is something that came with a burden. And
Yeah.
I pray about this podcast. I pray about our speakers. I pray about subjects.
Yes.
I have people messaging me asking for certain subjects, and there have been podcasts that we have done that people are messaging and they're saying, I needed this. I needed this word. I needed
Wow.
this help. And whenever you start hearing that and you start realizing that, it's
It's a
like this really is
ministry.
not
It's
about
ministry.
100%.
It
And when
is a
you do
ministry.
something that's not about you and it's not for you and it's not always about what you feel like. I
Yeah.
taught a class to some of our young people this summer. I was asked to speak to them and I said, you know what? It just depends on who you're living for.
Yeah.
When you're living for yourself and you don't feel like going to choir or, you don't feel like showing up to church, you don't feel like going to prayer meeting. There's things and days that we all don't feel like doing certain things
Absolutely.
supposed to do. And when you're living for yourself, you might not show up.
Yeah.
You might do what you feel like doing. But when you're living a life that is pleasing unto God, you're living for God and you're living everything that you are doing and you are breathing and you realize, you know what? Every breath that I take, it's for Him. It's to please Him. As unto Him.
Mhm.
Everything that I do is going to be as unto God.
Are
And
you
whenever
saying committed to God? You mean commitment?
fully committed and you
It's
start saying, I'm living for Him, then it
That's
doesn't matter
right.
if I don't feel like doing a podcast and
That's
I
right.
don't have something to do.
That's
This isn't
right.
unto me. This podcast isn't the Jamie Herndon podcast. It is unashamedly you
Mm.
stepping into your God-given
Yes.
calling And if I'm going to encourage people to do that, I'm going to have to do it myself.
Exactly. So walk the walk, talk the talk, right? My husband was teaching a Bible study, and I've heard this my whole life. It's you about being walking, living for the Lord. It's if you live for the Lord hard, it's easy. If you live for the Lord easy, it's hard. And it's an old saying, an old cliche, but it's really true, and it resonates with what you just said. Commitment is everything. And I feel like people that don't have a commitment and don't have a purpose in life, they're just floating through the air, and they're struggling. Okay.
Commitment is a big problem right now. I feel like in the world in general, like people they don't have to be committed. We're not committed to
Yeah.
friendships. We're not committed to marriage. People aren't committed to children,
Mm-mm.
to God in the very least of their commitments, committed to church, committed to Bible studies, committed to the things that they are supposed to be committed to.
Exactly.
We live in a life it's very selfish, and the Bible talked about that would be the last days,
Yeah.
unthankfulness, and whenever you're not grateful for the things you have,
Oh, you're speaking my language
you're
now.
not going to be committed to the things
Yep.
that you have.
Yep.
And it's easy to not be committed. It's
Yes.
easy to live that life, but whenever you say, you know what, that's not going to be me. I'm going to be committed to the things that I say I'm going to do and that God calls me to.
Absolutely.
Just show up.
Well, I want to ask you another question.
Yeah.
If there's ladies on here listening and they feel like they've had a tugging in their heart about multiple things, some of it could be spiritual, it could be business, and the Lord's prompted them to write a book or, do a podcast. How would you address that woman, and what would you say to her to encourage her to follow that? And you've already said it up front that almost everyone that you've interviewed has said those times when they had to follow what the Lord was telling me. It wasn't easy. They were scared. They were afraid. I would love to hear your words of encouragement to that lady out there listening to this podcast today saying, maybe God's speaking through me right now through Jamie, and I would love to hear your impartation of encouragement to those ladies listening today.
Um, I would say that you really have to pick who you're living for. You have to make that decision, and it's so
Mhm.
true, and it's just the way that it is. You have to decide, who are you trying to please? Whose will are you after? And you have to decide if it's yours, if
Mhm.
it's others, if it's their opinions, if it's
Yep.
what they're thinking about you, if that's what you're thinking about, or if it's God's. You
Yeah.
have you have to decide. You have to make a decision. You cannot live in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You cannot live in others' opinions and walk in the perfect will of God.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision. So when God's calling you to something, you have to decide, am I going to follow after him? Am I going to listen to his voice? And then you also, when you're in that situation, when God is calling you to something, and I've been there multiple times, when God has been asking something of me, I have to stop and I have to step back and I have to say, who's who am I listening? Who's the loudest right now?
Mhm. Yes.
Is it myself saying, God, there's no way, pick the wrong girl. I
Yes.
can do this. This isn't for me. Is it others? Am I sitting there thinking, well, what are they going to think? What if, and especially if we live in a social media world, and if something that you're going to do, people are going to know about it. What if I say this, or what if I do this, or, what if God's calling you to pray with someone and they think this about me, or, we immediately start thinking about what others,
What if about everything, right?
everything. And
Yeah.
then you have to stop and you have to say, but whose voice is the loudest? And you have to be intentional to
Yes.
hear God's voice over social media,
The
over
noise,
your own mind,
the background noise.
and over others' opinions. You have to be intentional about that. But Esther 4:14 is my absolute favorite verse. And the ESV says it like this: For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But
Ooh,
your father's house will perish. And who knows whether or not you have come to the kingdom for such a time
such
as
a
this.
time as this.
And we love that, for such a time as this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
hear that.
But
We
we don't read
hear
the
that.
rest of we don't read
No,
the,
we don't start at that beginning, and it says, if you keep silent at this time,
right.
relief and deliverance will rise. Deliverance will come. Whatever God is asking of you,
Yes.
whatever he's placed on your heart to do, and for a fact, it was birthed in prayer, or God spoke to you through a message, or he spoke to you through the man of God, through a woman of God, and you know for a fact God is calling you to something, but you're pushing it to the side, you're ignoring it, you're acting like that you didn't feel it, you didn't know about it because you feel scared, and you've got all these reasons why you shouldn't do it. I always think deliverance will come. You are not big enough to stop the will of God.
That's right.
You cannot stop God's will. It will be done. If he's calling you like calling you to create a clothing line for women to be able to dress modesty, to be able to find that, that's a ministry.
Yeah.
That's something that God calls you to.
Yes.
But that's not just for you.
No.
It's not just your calling is never going to be alone.
No.
It's not like you're the only vessel in the world God can use. And if you say no, then God's will is stopped. Absolutely not.
He just moves on, doesn't he? Next.
Becomes, are you going to be where the deliverance comes from? Are you going to be where the one that God is able to raise up and he's able to use, and you're a vessel that he can use? You have to make that decision, and you have to say, God, I'm willing, I'm ready. Use me, show me, direct me. Or you can ignore it. His will's still going to be done.
That's
Have you ever been asked and just like thought to do something, you didn't do it, you didn't act on it, and all of a sudden somebody else started doing it, and you're like, I've had people tell me, and they say,
absolutely. It's happened.
I felt like doing that. I felt like God was calling me to that. And then she went and done it. Now it's going to look like I'm copying her. And then you're really not going to do the will of God. And it's like, you're not the only one God can use. You're not the only one he's calling. But you turn it around and start saying, I have had to tell the Lord many times, God, I feel so privileged. I'm thankful that you would call me, that you would ask of me. And if you're asking me to do it, God, I'm willing to walk through the door. You're going to have to open the doors, and you're going to have to prepare me whenever I get through the door to do this. But God, if he's calling you to it, it's not like he's going to ask you to do it and do it on your own.
If he's calling you to it, he's going to bring you through it, right?
Every time.
Yes,
and
he does.
He's going to do it. It's just through you. He just needs the vessel.
That's all.
He just needs the feet. He doesn't need your income. He doesn't need your resources. He doesn't need your smarts. He doesn't need anything about you. He just needs a vessel to put it.
Right.
And if you're willing to let him put it in you, then he's going to be the one that's flowing out of you.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love your passion. It makes me so happy. It makes me so happy because it just flows from you. And I know it's you're so passionate about this, and it just makes me so happy. I've been a pastor's wife for 37, 38 years, and, working in this field of being used of God, sometimes it's not an easy path. It's not always the most glorious. People look and stand back. Oh, their ministry is not for the weak. It's not for the faint.
No.
And that doesn't mean just pastors. I'm talking about people like you that have a ministry, and it's not pulpit ministry, but it's a ministry. And you're right. A willing vessel is the main thing. Is the main thing is you have to be willing to do what God is calling you to do. Okay. Well, we've kind of talked about. We've talked about the hustle. We've talked about faith. And then now I want to talk about, we're not going to do fashion because that's not where we're going today. But I want to ask you some fun questions. We're going to shoot fire questions at you. I'm going to ask you questions. I want to just get to know you a little bit. Oh, by the way, I didn't even ask you about your family. Tell me about your children. I know you have children. And your husband and where you guys live. We want to set that aside because I kind of left that out at the beginning. Tell me just a brief synopsis of you and your family.
I am a mom of 3.
Oh.
Ada just started high school. School just started this week. Yeah, so Ada started high school, so that's fun.
You look too young to have a high schooler.
Thank you, I agree. I feel too young in every aspect except my knees. But yes, I know my husband and I'm like, you do know that she's, going into 9th grade. I'm like, you do know that I started liking you in the 9th grade, right? He's like, I don't even want to talk about it. This is crazy. There's no way that this could be her, And I'm like, just forewarning. So Ada started high school, and then Evie Joy, she is going into 6th grade, and in 6th grade at Calvary Academy, their school, you get to go to the upper campus. So you're in a different campus from K2 to 5th grade. And then in 6th grade, you get to go to the upper campus with high school students. And so middle school and high school. So that's new, and she's
That's
loving
cool.
it. But it's the best thing ever. They don't have to walk in a line. They don't have to be quiet in the hallways. They get to hang out and be loud
I love it.
with all their friends at lunchtime in the different grades. They don't have to stay. So that's like the best thing ever to her, and she's loving that. And then Ezra, he is our wild little boy, and he is
Oh, he's the
7.
third one, huh?
Because
He's
he's the baby and the boy. It's just not a good
yes.
combination. And they're always like, Mama's baby. And I'm like, y'all better hush right now.
Well, Dallas was my third boy, but he was definitely my baby. That everybody always said, "Oh, he's your baby." I'm like, "Yep, he sure
Yes,
is.
he sure is.
He sure is."
So Ezra just went into second grade. He'll
Oh.
be 8 next month, which makes my heart cry. Um, we'll be married 19 years to Matt. He says,
Congratulations.
thank you. He says that he is the workhorse behind Unashamedly You.
Yes.
It's like the pack mule. So we will be married 19 years next month. And we were high school sweethearts. Like I said, we
Oh,
started dating in ninth and 10th grade.
that's awesome. Did you
Yeah.
guys, were you in Little Rock at that when did you grow up there?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was born and
Okay.
raised in Little Rock, and FPC NLR has been my home ever since the day I was born.
Oh, that's
First place
wonderful.
I ever went. Yes. So our pastor's wife, Sister Jan Holmes, she was the second person to hold me behind my dad. um,
Oh,
so yeah, it's just special that I was able, and I count it as like the biggest privilege of my life is being raised here in the best
oh,
church in the
that's
world.
awesome.
And so that's all I've ever known is FPC and LR. And people talk about, different things in different places. And I'm like, this is all I've ever known. I
This
don't even
is
know that it's different anywhere
this is
else.
home. Yeah, this is where I grew up.
This is it. And then Matt, his story is a little bit different. He started coming to Calvary Academy in the 7th grade. His mom, he says, started dragging him to this really weird Pentecostal church in like the 4th or 5th grade. Him and his sister. And then they started Calvary.
He called it weird, you said?
Yes, he says it was just like this really weird. He said that he would bring his pillow in one pocket and his Game Boy in the other, like get out, play his Game Boy until preaching and then fall asleep.
That's hilarious. He had a whole system set up
He
then.
said all these women, like, he just thought it was so crazy. Everybody looked the exact same with like their hairdos and their skirts and no makeup. And he just wasn't raised like that. I mean,
Yeah,
knew nothing about it, and but God saved him, and his mom decided to bring him and his sister, and God saved his family. So
that's amazing.
his mom is in church, and then his dad actually prayed through after we got married.
Oh,
I won him to God. I just kept on, and he
that's amazing.
he wouldn't come for his kids, but he would come for me. So, so that happened. And so that's awesome. So Matt, he's not first generation technically, like his mom is in church and now his dad's in church, but
Sure.
they all got in church together, or his dad was
That's
after them. So
yes.
it's kind of like first generation, I guess you could say. Um, so that's how they were. But as far as me, my entire family were my grandparents all were like my story goes way back here, but my dad actually was dropped off at the children's home. This is a big long story. We won't go
Wow.
into all that here
Yeah.
with Holmeses. He was only 3 years old. So his
Wow.
story starts there. And from there, God just led and directed his mom as to where she was going to take them. She took